80s and 90s, much of the same. Actually, looking into this, it was interesting. There's been almost 60 consoles developed for the home between 1971 and 2000. So there was an influx of many choices, and everybody knows all the games that came along with this as well. Then 2000s hit. We saw consolidation of the console market. 3 major players came out, and those 3 major players turned around, had another generation of consoles come out. So, thinking about that interactive gaming experience in the living room, I'd like to then introduce the idea of what does it really mean to have social networking services in the living room? Well, not many people know AOL started in the mid-70s, and when it was originally formed, it was actually a company called CVC. I don't know how many people remember this back in the days of the Atari 2700, but it was actually first developed as a gaming company. They came around and they set up a modem-based system that allowed you to upload stats and download some downloadable content. It was around for about 8 years, never really took off. Actually, it was about to go bankrupt until Steve Case came in, and they completely transformed AOL to be an internet access and a social networking, one of the first social networking commercial opportunities. But again, not focused on the living room, back to the PC. And everybody knows the story of 2000. The introduction of MySpace, Bebo, Friendster, Facebook, Twitter, all these different experiences, together with the ubiquity of Wi-Fi in the home, and every kid having their own laptop and iPod, and now everybody's starting to do these things in the living room. So as you look at these 3 trends, again, mass market media, interactive gaming services, social networking, there's really 2 of these threads have really embraced each other, and they've done it in a bunch of different ways. We all know Zynga. What would Zynga be without Facebook? What would Facebook be without Zynga? The interaction between gaming and social networking has just been there for a while. But the whole time, really have kind of neglected how do you start to transform this mass media, linear entertainment that's been coming into the home. So, Sean said, let's talk a little bit more about Xbox Live. So what I'd like to do is run through a little bit of the history of Live and kind of how these different threads and these thinking drove a lot of the work that we did. So, the console was first launched in November 2001. I think everybody remembers it, the green interface, the funny noises in the background when you turned it on. But at that time, Jay Allard was pretty much 100% involved in driving the work that we were doing. He made 2 big bets. One was around a hard drive, so you could get content on it. And the other one was about an Ethernet port in the back. And when we went out and said you were going to require broadband for online service, everybody said, what are you talking about? It was 2001. Broadband penetration in the home was down, or it hadn't really started to take off yet. People didn't understand it. And Jay had this great quote. He used to say you couldn't eat pizza through a straw. There was a bet that the Xbox was making, and yes, we were developing a console. Yes, it was plugging into the TV. But the vision was always that the service was going to be the center of this, and they were going to bet big on it, and that we were always going to be looking a few years in advance on what we were doing as it related to that service. So then November 2002 came along, and Live launched. One of the first games that actually was turned on was NFL Fever in the United States. And what was interesting about NFL Fever, it was a game that had actually released the previous year. And as soon as Live launched, it updated that title, and all of a sudden we had an online multiplayer game in the living room enabled that previously had only been a single-player game. So talking a little bit about transformative moments, this was about right at the time that I joined the team. The picture right next to that is probably everybody recognizes as Ghost Recon. For me, this was one of the most transformative moments, knowing that I had just joined this team, starting to play Ghost Recon. I saw this glimpse, grabbed the disc, grabbed the Xbox Live Starter Kit, sent it to my brother over in the other side of the country. And that night, or when he received it that night, we got online and played together. A squad-based shooter, what people were used to playing. Only this time I was playing with my brother on the other side of the country, sitting in my couch, talking to him. It was at that point that I realized the power of what we were doing. So, Xbox Live had launched. My first responsibility on the team was I came over here and we actually coordinated getting the rest of Europe up and running on Live. But during that year, right after that, as we got into 2003, the entire team's attention turned to something else. Halo 1 had been a giant success. Everybody knows the story. We had the opportunity, working together closely with Bungie, in fact, Chris Butcher at the time, came to us and said, you know what? We're betting everything on multiplayer for the next version of this. It's all about going online, and we want to work with you to actually figure out what are the type of platform things you can do to support us as creatives to go out and build the best multiplayer experience possible. So at the time, they came to us and they had a lot of requests. We started going through the details of some of the things, and one of the things was they wanted open internet access to be able to do things like Bungie.net. So we delivered an external service that allowed them to plug into that outside of our secure stack. We also took a look at matchmaking. Matchmaking was central to what they wanted to do. Prior to this, when you were in a multiplayer session, if the host quit, the whole session disappeared. In their view, unacceptable, and we totally agreed. So we worked on the networking layers with them and actually developed the mechanics so that they could do host migration, things that people just take for granted today. Another example of something that we worked with them on was their party system. Party system that kind of became the standard for the industry. One of the things that Chris had this vision of was he wanted to get people to progressively grow in skill and not be turned off as soon as they jumped into a game session. So we worked on this system called TrueSkill. We worked together with the Cambridge research team over here and came up with an algorithm that we actually built into the platform called TrueSkill. TrueSkill enabled Bungie to go off and then build their party system such that when people got together, we knew the probability of winning or losing before they even played the game after users had played enough. So all of this was gearing up towards Halo, or Halo 2. And when I look back on Live, this is probably one of the most transformative moments for us. It's what set the stage for us actually accelerating multiplayer gaming in the living room, not just for Halo, but as a platform for all titles to take advantage of. Right before it launched, it was a milestone for Live, and then we hit 1 million members. And then in November of that year, Halo launched. Then came 2005. 2005 was the year of the Xbox 360 launch. To this point, almost everything that we had been doing with Live were built into libraries. Games had to build them into their actual executables, and if we wanted to update something in Live, you actually had to reship the game. A lot of heavy lifting by the titles. When we launched 360, there were two principles that we wanted to add. One was, well, not add, but really focus on. It was putting the gamer at the center and taking the load off the developer. We introduced the 360 button at the center of the console. The idea being, let's take some of the best things that we're doing around community. Let's take some of the best things we're doing around multiplayer play, around messaging, and let's put them in the user's control and take them off the weight of the developer. With the press of the 360 button, you had access to what we called the concurrent resources. It allowed you to actually get in and do things outside of the game. You could update the game, we could update the system, and they could live independently. Things like messaging were introduced. The extended friends list. And of course, we introduced the marketplace. Marketplace was a big addition to the platform at this time. With the marketplace, we introduced the opportunity to download games, download demos, download downloadable content to extend the life of games. And one of the things that happened when we did this, there was a lot of pushback in the gaming industry. And the pushback came in the form of titles not really wanting to do downloadable content. We were living at a time where it was still very focused on retail. Game developers and publishers, when they looked at this, would question why would we want to spend time and money doing another add-on pack when we can take those resources and put them on the next version of the game. There was an appreciation for actually extending the online time that people were spending in their franchises. Also, there wasn't this value around demos. People didn't believe that it was important to actually ship a demo so that someone can try it before buying the game. With the marketplace, we completely changed this. We proved out some of the concepts. Fight Night was a perfect example where the conversion rate for a downloadable game was beyond what anybody ever expected. And then, of course, there was the achievements. One of the simplest things that could have been done was adding an achievement-based system ubiquitously across the entire platform, and along with that, a gamer score. And with that, not only did we create a reward system, we created a system that games took advantage of in different ways. It actually changed the way certain games developed and designed. A good example would be Geometry Wars, where they added the Passivity Award, where it basically introduced a whole new way to play the game based on just awarding something to the user. As we got to the next year, in 2006, Live introduced the concept of video, and this is where we actually started to introduce, in a more integrated fashion, mass entertainment content into the platform, or into the Live platform. Then in 2008, we completely changed the entire interface. This was when we launched what was called the new Xbox experience. And without having any kind of hardware change, and strictly through the Live service, we completely revamped Xbox Live again in 2008. We introduced a new interface, which actually went from being very task-based to being more discovery-based. Now when you turned on your console, you had an Inside Xbox channel, you had a Spotlight channel, you had a Marketplace channel for movies and for games. You actually could turn on your console and discover things to do, as opposed to it being very task-based, where you used to turn it on, know exactly what you wanted to do, and go do it. Along with the new interface, we introduced the extended profile, which of course included the avatars. And there were mixed feedback on avatars when they first came out, but since that time, people have gotten very passionate about their avatars, and it's become a central part of our platform. One other feature that we released when we shipped NXE was the party mode. And this goes back to putting the user at the center of the experience. Previously, when people went into games, you would get a group together, you play. If you wanted to move to another game, everybody had to disband. Somebody had to go into the next game. Then you had to invite everybody back together. And it was a very unnatural way to think about actually doing multiplayer gaming across multiple games. With the party system, what we introduced was this concept, again, back at the system level, without the game having to manage it. People can get together, people can talk. People can be together in a game session, and that game session can move from experience to experience. One of the other things that we did in the new Xbox experience was actually change the underlying platform for Xbox Live. Previous to this, when we updated the dashboard or the system, it was done monolithically. It required a flash update from the service, and every application experience was part of that single flash update. In 2008, we actually broke Live apart so that it had different components, and it enabled us to start doing development at a more micro level within the system experience. And what that enabled us to do were things like Netflix. And Netflix came on in 2008 in the United States, and I think, as most people know, it's a streaming-based movie experience that had brought a whole new type of customer into Xbox Live. So, 2009. If you notice, we had the gaming and the social networking have always been wrapped around together since we launched Live. And this was the year that we actually started to focus on how do you start to bring mass content? How do you start to bring movies? How do you start to bring television? How do you start to bring music into this interactive experience?